few minutes here to get this thing warmed up. Just in the stuff you had sent me, and I hadn't realized that your family, a lot of them moved to Guernsey County, Ohio. Just 2 weeks ago, I stayed in Cambridge, I guess it is.
Yeah, sure.
And I was at my sister's house in Columbus, and on the way back, I went to the Zane Grey Museum.
Oh.
And just because I saw the sign, I thought I'd stop.
Oh, it's nice.
And I saw the whole thing they had about Zane's Trace, which I take it, that some of the SPEERs lived along. And of course, I bought a Zane Grey novel, and I read it. It was quite an experience. That was a lot of fun. The area that your family eventually settled in, the SPEER family, would be called the Marsh Creek Settlement. And it's kind of interesting, the Marsh Creek Settlement, if you talk about that or you use that name around here and talk to local people, they have no idea what you're talking about. That name has not been used to describe this area in many, many years. Now, the area that we are in right now, like every other area, was once inhabited by other animals. And in 1936, near York Springs, Pennsylvania, about 20 miles north and east of here, at a quarry, they actually discovered dinosaur footprints. And some of the dinosaur footprints they discovered at the quarry were sent to the Smithsonian, and some of them are on display at the State Museum in Harrisburg. So there were dinosaurs that roamed this area at one time. Of course, there were also Native Americans that lived in this area. And oftentimes, people in the area find artifacts relating to these Native American peoples. But most of the artifacts that are being found in this area, still to this day, do not relate to Native Americans that lived in this area recently, meaning Native Americans that would have been known by the Europeans that came into this area. For the most part, the peoples that lived in this area had moved westward or northward. And this area was sort of unoccupied at the time of European settlement, except for some transient Indians that had been moving through the area and were temporarily settling here, or groups that were hunting in this area from other places. So this is not an area that there were large Indian villages in at the time that Europeans began to settle the area. But even having said that, just not far from Fairfield here, there is a farm on which a large amount of artifacts have been found over the years. But again, most of these artifacts are thousands of years old and not necessarily hundreds of years old. There were some interaction with early settlers and Native Americans in this area, but that was primarily during the French and Indian War, when the settlers were facing off against peoples that lived in western Pennsylvania, or what we know as the Ohio River Valley, the Delaware, or the Shawnee Indians, which were raiding into these areas. Of course, we're in Pennsylvania, and William Penn received a grant of land from Charles II of England, about 45,000 square miles of land, depending on where you figure the boundaries are. In 1681, he named it Penn's Woods, or Pennsylvania. There were a couple reasons for the grant. One of them was income for his family, and of course, he wanted to create a safe haven for his fellow Quakers and other people that had been subjected to religious persecution. As a matter of fact, Penn referred to this place as his holy experiment. William Penn died in 1718, but the lands continued to be administered by his wife and then his sons and actually a grandson through the early period of settlement we're talking about. Many people who live locally like to say that they can trace their deed all the way back to William Penn, or they have a deed signed by William Penn. And it's always my great pleasure to tell them they do not. He died before anyone in this area was given a land deed or a warrant or a patent. I always get a big kick out of doing that. So the people here do not have land grants from William Penn. If they're lucky, they got something signed by one of his sons. Penn took a peaceable approach with the Native Americans throughout the early settlement of Pennsylvania. And he always signed treaties with whichever group claimed title to the area in which he was settling. And there's actually several examples of where early settlers moved into an area of Pennsylvania in which Penn did not have a clear treaty with the Native American group, and he actually sent his agents out to dispatch them from that area. And he actually burned down some cabins of settlers and sent them on their way. Finally, in 1736, there was a treaty in which we now, consider Adams County. The treaty was on October 11th, 1736, and it was represented as an Onondaga, Seneca, Oneida, Tuscarora, and Cayuga Indians. And the treaty is kind of interesting that he signed with them. The wording of the first agreement gave Penn control of the lands from the Susquehanna River to the setting sun. Yeah. And with a lot of these treaties, one may question whether the two sides ever fully shared the same understanding of what they were doing when these natives formally relinquished their rights. But clearly, the policies adopted by Penn and his negotiators kept Pennsylvania free from Indian wars for the first 70 years of its history, unlike other states. 3 weeks after the Penn family acquired title to this land, Thomas Penn, William's son, began confirming lands west of the Susquehanna River. And I should mention that the area we're in right now was originally part of one of the 3 original Pennsylvania counties, Chester County. But in 1729, Lancaster County was formed. And this area fell into what is known as Lancaster County. In 1749, York County was formed, and we are in York County. And then in 1800, Adams County was founded out of the western portion of York, and we are in Adams County today. So what's interesting about this is we're going to talk about one of the first settlers. I guess it's possible that if you came into this area early on, you are in Chester, then you're York, Adams, Lancaster, York, Adams, without even moving. You were in these different places. So I think when genealogists look back and try to understand what's going on with their relatives, they think the relative is moving, but the relative is not moving. They're just designating this place as different areas. The same thing goes with townships. And some of you probably noticed that your relative lives in, the original SPEER lives in Hamilton Bond Township, and then later Liberty Township without moving, because they create new townships. Now, I wanted to just mention, from our perspective of research, that land in Pennsylvania, there is a 3-step process to gaining land. There is what we call a warrant. And a warrant is a formal request that a survey be done for a piece of land. And of course, what you would have is you'd have a person called a squatter. And a squatter would come out to the wilderness, and they would build a log cabin, and they would say, I want to live right here. And then eventually, they would make a request, a warrant. And a warrant, you could ask for, let's say, I want to have 50 acres of land. or I want 300 acres of land. Now, the warrant, you had to pay more for the more land you wanted. So you're not going to ask for 1,000 acres. And actually, in some cases, in areas, limited the amount of acres you could have. And then eventually, they sent a surveyor out. And the surveyor would survey, let's say you asked for 100 acres, and it would survey the land. The surveyor would know where everyone else's property boundaries ended. They would have a master connected draft of all the land in the area. So let's say you said you wanted 300 acres and you built your log cabin, and they look around you, and a couple hundred yards away there's a piece of land here, a piece of land there, and you can only get 40 acres out of the area that you live in. You only get 40 acres. So the surveyor would make a formal survey of your property. People usually were savvy enough to get a warrant for the correct amount of land, or near about the correct amount of land. So you would have to pay the surveyor for his services. And after you did that, then he would grant you a survey. And the survey would be for a certain amount of land that was going to be issued to you, and then you would have to pay the Commonwealth of Pennsylvania for that land. And there was a certain price that was established for land in the Commonwealth of Pennsylvania. And you just take that amount of land you got, however amount they say, you know, whatever year it is, for that's how much you have to pay, and you send that money in. And once you pay, then the Commonwealth of Pennsylvania sends you, the third thing you get, a patent deed. Here's what's really weird when you're trying to do research, and I don't know how many people have tried to do this kind of research, but years could pass between this process. And what's really, really weird, and today we have a hard time understanding this, is one person would be the squatter, and they would get a warrant. And then they would sell the land to someone else, only with a warrant. And then the next person would have a survey done, or two people later would have a survey done. And then they would sell to somebody else, and they would die, and somebody else would get a patent deed. Sometimes, like 60 years went by between the time somebody got a warrant and somebody got a survey done. Now, it didn't have to. You could follow the process through on your own, but it took some time. And I did pull, just for your amusement, from the draft books for your county, the survey for Robert Speer's land, the 192 acres that are today, and I guess it's in Freedom Town, or is it in Liberty? Is it Freedom?
Liberty.
I'm sure you guys know better than me. Liberty. We call it, I know it's near the corner of Bullfrog Road and Pumping Station Road. As a matter of fact, I haven't been out there in a while, but the last time I was out there, there is this huge pavilion used by a Bible conference right on the land. Have you seen that? Yeah. As a matter of fact, I know that land at the corner of Bullfrog and Pumping Station at the time of the Civil War was owned by a guy named William Ross White, who played a little bit of a role in the Battle of Gettysburg. Troops of the 121st Pennsylvania Infantry camped on Robert Speer's land the night before the Battle of Gettysburg. I'm a battlefield tour guide, so everything relates to the Civil War for me. Now, Robert Speer's survey is kind of interesting because his land is right at the line of something called the Manor of the Mask, or the Manor of Mask, I should say. And actually, a piece of the land actually runs out away from the Manor of Mask. We'll talk about that in a moment. And the survey shows the boundaries of the land, 192 acres, and it shows you the adjoiners to that land. It also says that the land is near Middle Creek. So you learn a lot by these surveys. Sometimes they show you on the survey where the house of the person is located. On this particular one, it doesn't. But this is a copy of the original survey.
Does that give a date?
Oh yeah, on the other one, yeah, I know you guys have it because I've seen in some of your material that you're already familiar with this. It's surveyed, is it April 19th, 1774, something like that. And I think they processed it on 5th of January, 1775. And it's the surveyors Archibald McLean, who did a lot of surveys in the area. And I take it that eventually one of the Speers marries one of Archibald's descendants, Moses McLean.
One of his brothers, William.
Oh.
So we're descended from William McLean.
Okay. Yeah, I don't want to, I'm not your family genealogist, so.
No, but you know, these brothers were all surveyors,
yes.
So that was pretty great.
Yes, Moses. And Archibald and Moses, there's some, I'm going to talk about that in a second, but there's some discussion that when Mason and Dixon came through the area, they'd actually assist them in surveying part of the Mason-Dixon line in our area. And of course, why wouldn't you, as you're coming through the area, contact the local surveyors that knew all the lines of property? But I find that interesting. Also, one thing that I just wanted to show you, we have a lot of resources at the Adams County Historical Society. And if some of you have read in the family history that they owned slaves, Robert Speer, here is, I just pulled this morning because I read it in one of the papers that you detailed. This is the 1807 septennial census for Adams County, and it lists Robert Speer owning a Negro named Deff, D-E-F-F, I take it is. And apparently, Deff is 35 years old. And I think in some of your material it said it was a woman, but I think that implies it's a man. Now down here, you see Abraham Scott, another relative of your family? He owns a Negro wench, or wench, I guess, named Din, who's 60 years old. So that's fascinating. One thing, I'm going to talk about the Scotch-Irish. One thing you should know, that Scotch-Irish Presbyterians, early on in the county history, are slave owners. There were about 300 slaves in Adams County in the 1790 census. And I guess in 1800 census, there's about 110. And the 1810 census, there's still about 70. So as the years went by, there were less and less slaves. And by the 1840 census, slavery did not exist in this area. But Pennsylvania never passed an act abolishing slavery. They created an act for the eventual emancipation